get the best experience from. This talk is targeted at people who know at least a little about Maven 2. There's no warm-up to what is Maven or anything like that. I've given that in the past, but enough people have used Maven now that they're clamoring for something a little bit more serious and a little bit more focused on the differences between Maven 2 and Maven 3. So I just want to set the expectations accordingly. That's what this talk is about. The differences between it, why you care, what you'll see when it comes out, how it'll impact you, what the changes are under the covers. That's what we're going to discuss here today. So if that excludes anyone, I hope not, but if it does, I'm not offended. So you can switch to a talk that better suits you if you like. But I hope you stay. I will go ahead and prime it, given that I have just a couple more minutes before we start, by saying that at my discretion, the best question that I get, please interrupt and ask a question. Best question gets a copy of this book that I brought from Sonatype. So think of them now. You can start working on the questions even before the talk starts. No, an exclusion. He lives near me. It automatically excludes him from the availability of that. But you know what? I can arrange for a one-on-one session that will be better than the book. So, any other thoughts or questions before the formal time? I mean, I'm here and I like to field them. Any just getting started questions? Any thoughts you'd like to kind of kick off this discussion with? Anything's fair game? Multiple versions of repositories. Why do we have that? From at least Maven 2 to Maven 3, it'll stay the same. There was definitely some engineering mistakes made in the first version of it, so that's a good question. Why two different versions of repositories, Maven 1, Maven 2? Maven 1 was almost a thought experiment. Do these things work? Does this idea really hold? Does it work in the enterprise? And I think Maven 2 was kind of an acknowledgement of it does work. And in fact, let's go ahead and take the things we experimented with and kind of make them formal versus just an experiment. I think that was the thought process. But from 2 to 3, absolutely the same. Some people have made some efforts to try to integrate it with other languages, building native stuff, native archives, building RPMs, for example, or something like that. But I think that they try to do their focus behavior really well and then just admit that there are other tools that probably work better in the other space. I think I've had better make, rake, Gantt builds to do things outside the Maven way. If it's outside the Java space, I've had better experience with those tools in some of He likes Maven so much that he's upset it can't do the other things for the other languages. No, I agree. Right. I'm starting to see some things work towards it, though. I agree they're not there, but I'm seeing all kinds of little seeds being planted that are kind of going that direction. But I think it's still crystal ball. I think it's a couple years off before we see that. Why? I don't have a good why for you. All right, precisely on the nose, starting right on time. Let's start talking about Maven 3. So I've got 50 minutes with you guys to do this, but we can stretch out into the hallways if you like afterwards, because Maven is kind of one of the primary things that I work on day in and day out. So grab me at lunch. Let's sit together if you have more stuff that spills outside the talk. But please do interrupt with questions during this talk. There's no sacred time as far as this goes. So I'm going to give you the introduction, plant the seeds, and let you ask the good questions. Maven 3, a couple of premises. I set this up in advance, but who will enjoy this talk today? 5 seconds of who that'll be. Someone who knows, dabbled with, played with a little bit the Maven 2 space, but I got to give you that in advance of the talk. What do I have to do with the Maven environment? So this is my only brag slide out of the entire seminar, entire session here. I'm on the back guide of Maven, the book, and I've worked with it for a very long time. I wrote the ref card. It's a free download. I'd really suggest you get that. And I've been teaching classes. It says 3 virtual classes a month, and that's now 3 per week as of this point. So I've taught a lot of teams in India as well over the internet and virtual training. I've been using it since version 0.7, so I've been on the pain, I've been on the good times, I've been through all this experience with you, but I think I can field most any question as far as the technical details go. So let's start talking about why we have Maven 3, what the goals are, what it's trying to achieve here. So the roadmap for Maven 3 really starts with the fact that Sonatype has donated significant amounts of time and effort to developing this product. They're the ones financially backing the developers that are working literally 7 days a week on this to get it out the door. So Maven 3 is a beta right now. And in fact, I'm pretty excited to tell you that as of 2 days ago, it got promoted, and it's going to get to the distribution site tomorrow for public consumption of the final betas that were in the final track towards release. So it's on literally the home stretch of the slide here. I wish I could draw a cricket analogy for that. We're working on it. I'm going to try over lunch. I can do a baseball, but I can't do cricket quite yet. So compatibility. The neat part that I get to tell you is that we have worked incredibly hard to make this backwards compatible. This is not the same shift from Maven 1 to Maven 2. Not in the least. This is very, very different. This is a drop-in replacement. And your network says someone just took over my IP address, which is fine. It has hundreds of projects that we're currently testing this against. So I feel with a high level of confidence on a continuous integration server that I can say this is a drop-in replacement. And so much so that I have dozens of companies that I work with, and I've been using Maven 3 for almost 6 months exclusively with little to no problems. So this is nice to be able to brag as to what a good product this will be. Not stay away from the 3.0. No, this is, we've been baking it in the background so long that when it becomes released, it's going to be a really nice copy. It's got some legacy simulation, but you're not going to see much of that. It doesn't bleed through. And in fact, the main goals, what we set up as the goals for Maven 3 were speed. Benchmarks for the numbers of both disk, memory consumption, network throughput. We have metrics around all of this that are being captured in the integration tests. So I can say with absolute confidence that it will, in any situation, be faster than Maven 2. I won't give you an exact number for your project, but I can say with absolute confidence it is faster in every situation. So that's our metrics for how we're kind of giving ourselves milestones and whether we can cut release candidates. So that is actually on some of those integration test projects that we're using, the existing Maven 2 projects. We have 2 continuous integration builds running, one with Maven 2, one with Maven 3, building the exact same projects and recording those numbers of the duration of the output for those builds. So that's where those numbers are coming from. These are often Apache projects, Codehouse projects, so they're things that you could empirically measure. You could pull them down and do exactly the same comparison yourself. Good one. And then fully embeddable. In a big hand-waving sense, I would say that the biggest change you actually won't care about from an end-user perspective. And you might look at me kind of funny for saying that. We've changed Maven from being a command line tool to being essentially a library. Wait a minute. What? We've written several hundred lines that represent the same command line that you know and love, but the core of the tool became a library. Anybody got to guess why that has a massive benefit to the ecosystem of Maven? Just throw some ideas out there. Why would being a library be great? I heard it. I heard every answer there. Consistency and tooling. If it's a library, nobody needs to keep rolling their own Maven parsers and Maven file processors and Maven lifecycle. That's done. You just drop in the library in an IDE, in Eclipse, in IntelliJ, in any of these toolings that use Maven. Absolute consistency. No more of this, it works a little different in Eclipse than it does at the command line. The day of that is over. Absolute consistency with just a nice light wrapper that represents the command line that you've always used. So it's really a basis for derived tools, and in fact, I'll show you a couple of those. As in all my talks, obligatory reference, I'm updating this probably twice a week now with links to the best stuff happening on Maven. Slides will be available for download tonight. I already sent yesterday's up to Dilip and team, so you'll be able to grab these links later. Now, POMs, specifically the pom.xml files. How does Maven 3 affect that? Well, first off, I can tell you that we kept exactly the same for that model version. There's been no change. So Maven 3.0, and I'm using very articulate numbers here in this case, Maven 3.0 stayed exactly the same for the project object model. The syntax is 100% the same. No XML tags got either eliminated or added. So if you know Maven 2 POMs, you absolutely know the full vocabulary of Maven 3. And now you say, well, thank you very much, and a bunch of you now exit the doors because I just told you that if you know Maven 2, you know Maven 3. But some of the details beneath that are important to know. So nice, solid base point that we can go from. Now, XML validations have been stepped up. So just because it was legal syntax in Maven 2 doesn't mean it was a good idea. There's things you can express with the XML that were never meant to be done. Invalid combinations, duplications, we're going to mention some of those situations. Validation has been kicked up a lot. So even though the vocabulary stayed exactly the same, we're trying to have better, intelligent, well-formed, expressive POMs than some of the mistakes that you could make in the past. And in fact, this is a good thing. If the tool catches it, it means you're not going to be Google searching for why this doesn't seem to work right. The tool will just say, I don't think you meant to do this. Bad idea. That's where I want my tool to stop and give me a recommendation. 3.0 POMs all run on 2.x though. So my prototyping that I've been talking about where I've been using it in advance, I'll do all the builds with Maven 3. Since it's not a released version, I'm not letting software out the door with it, but then I improve my POMs, I get rid of the warnings, I remove the errors, and then I build it back with Maven 2, and every single time it builds better and faster, even when I'm building back on Maven 2. So anything that you prototype today with Maven 3, backwards compatible, building that in Maven 2. Couple of the specific validations and errors. Yes, please. Because in general, as a responsible practitioner, I don't think it's a good idea to release software built with a beta tool. We're close to a final release. Sure. That's the beta. That's the final beta that's out tomorrow. Final version, weeks-ish. I can't give you an exact number, but weeks-ish. We're on a magnitude of weeks, not years or so on like that. So weeks ahead, once it becomes final, then I'll have that confidence. But I just feel like from a responsibility standpoint, not good at the minute. So it warns when your plugin versions are not specified. This has always been a best practice, but we're finally having the tool recommend the best practices rather than requiring you to specifically know these and memorize all these facets. So you're going to get a warning at the console. And in fact, let me go ahead and show that to you right now. So when you've omitted a plugin version. So you think about, well, how did this affect you in the past? This affected you when you just allowed the latest version to be selected. That really was kind of a misguided path for the tool. It was convenient, but it wasn't stable for production. You want to know what version of a plugin you're using. So here we go. For example, if I omitted, it says some problems were encountered, gives you nice details, tells you specifically the project and the plugin that was missing it. If I go back over to the pom.xml, the fix is exactly as you'd assume. Pop in a version, so I'm telling it what version of the plugin to use now rather than letting it assume the latest or guess the latest version. And once it's got that, go back over there, run another part of the life cycle, everything's happy. Simple. There wasn't much to that, but it gives you an appropriate warning, tells you what the fix process is. You go determine the version, you put it in, you're good, you're past the warning. And think about that. That'll work just fine. Back in Maven 2, you've now just locked it to a specific plugin version. Now, POM validations, a couple other things about this. That was an easy one. There is not yet. That's on the thought horizon, but the auto-completion is not there yet for those versions. At lunch, I can show you some techniques that are not official yet that kind of smooth that out, but given that they're not official, I don't have them straight up in the talk. So blocks of duplicate dependencies. This is just cruft code. This is like having two methods inside your POM as well. You're not really sure which one's going to execute, and Maven has had some change in behavior over its history saying, oh, is it the first one or is it the second one that's going to get chosen, especially if you had some configuration on a plugin that was different. This is just a bad idea. You need to clean this up so that we have one and only one specification. This is also a warning that gets caught at that point. And you'd be surprised. You think, we don't do that. But so did a lot of other teams that I work with, and you'd be surprised. We run Maven 3, and I can't believe we had 2 blocks of the same XML in our POMs. It happens. It's a mistake. Let the tool catch it. This is not a sense for embarrassment. The tool should be checking this. Absolutely, we agree. It does now. It tells you which one, and it tells you the 2 versions, so no ambiguity. You're not guessing which thing, which XML block, which version. It told you exactly. JUnit, let's clean one of these up. Let's eliminate a version, take one of the blocks out, and only have one. Wipe it out, go back to the prompt. We're good to go. So again, simple things, but you'd be surprised how many times these mistakes are made. So once we remove that, save that file, go back, do the build again, we're clean, we're good to go. Again, works better in Maven 2. If you clean that up, that's something that has value even to your Maven 2 builds today.
Question.
Yes?
So this duplicacy, is it within a project? I assume that I have 2 projects.
Within only a project, exactly. Wonderful question. Is that duplicate checking only within one POM file? Yes, only within one POM file today. There's visual tooling that's coming that does it across, but from the command line, one POM check only.
What is the visual tooling?
The M2 Eclipse plugin for Eclipse.
So then will it also treat it the same way, or will it say, okay, it's a duplicate?
It will give you a warning in the M2 Eclipse, whereas this was a stop error on the command line within the single POM.
So that will not stop you, right?
It will not stop you.
I have a specific requirement where I need to have 2 different versions for 2 different projects.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the comparison testing that you're talking about.
That will be a warning in the IDE, whereas in a single POM file, it's just a flat-out stop error. So, good point there. So, there we've cleaned up 2 minor things. Not huge, but minor. Help URLs. This is a big deal if you're coming up to speed with Maven. If you already have a bank of knowledge, you probably have a lot of these solutions baked into your head. But the nice part is for early when you have a problem, and I see the question over there, when you have a problem, we now have specific wiki pages which the community can edit, which we Google searched and achieved the same thing in the past, but now it's nice and formalized. We have a single place for the knowledge of, I got this problem. What should I do about it? We've got a canonical page that you should go to that the community can add the suggestions. And believe it or not, even in this beta and alpha mode, these pages are already significantly fleshed out. Even though this isn't a formal release, people are already putting all that knowledge that they've got on Google before into a formal page for the answers. And then, question?
Will the dependencies be, the duplicate dependencies be detected across transitive dependencies?
No, that's again something that there is a warning for in the M2 Eclipse GUI, but not an error message or stop at the command line. So, another good question there. So let's add a few more bits to this. Help URLs, wiki page, there's the address at the bottom. Relatively simple, but very nice for that. The pages look something like this. This one's still a little bit light. In fact, it's had quite a few edits in the last couple of days. I put a few things there myself. But for example, a project building exception tells you why, gives you the example, what might have you done, what can you fix. So some removals of a few things. So we're switching gears just slightly here. A few things have been taken out. Profiles.xml is an external file. Gone. That's done. You need to fold those into pom.xml now. You can just take the syntax as you have it in the profiles.xml and move it into the POM. There's no rewriting. Just move the contents into your pom.xml. But from a standalone file point, that's gone. There's a reason for this, and you're going to see it in just about 10 minutes. There's a very good motivation for this. Some additional tooling that's just uber cool. Maven 1.0 repository support format, kind of the question that we had beforehand, multiple repository types, why do we have it? That's gone. We're done. 7 years is too long to maintain backwards compatibility. At some point, you just have to give up the ghost and say, that's way too old of software. So we're doing that to a large degree with Maven 1, saying you need to be on 2 to come up to 3. 1 to 3, you're kind of on your own for that bit. But 7 years, really. That's been a long time. So that's a major change. Snapshots. If you use deployments and you're pushing them to an Apache server or some sort of dumb repository, not an intelligent repository manager, the feature of date stamping snapshots, some people turned this off in the past. That's gone. That was a bad idea. Again, somebody contributed a patch to that, and we said, okay, fine, it can go in. Gone. You now have a date stamp with every snapshot that goes up to the repository, but there's plenty of free open source repository managers, Nexus being my favorite, that handle and clean up after 2 weeks. They'll scrub the trailing 2 weeks of this. So this isn't a problem, but you need to be aware of this behavior change. Couple other bits that are a little more syntax and location specific. So artifact resolution, in order to improve the performance, remember that was a major goal, make it faster on disk, faster in memory, faster over the network. Artifact resolution has improved a little bit, and you'll find these files being cached in your .m2 repository directory of the last updated. And if you look at the contents of this file, you'll see that there's some information here that says when we last pulled it, where we pulled it from. It's got that timestamp information being saved. And the part that is a little bit controversial, and weigh in, send us emails, put it on the mailing list, a little bit controversial, is it caches not found. So instead of trying over and over where you've got a repository that's bad or an artifact that just doesn't exist anywhere, it caches not found, saying, okay, I couldn't find it, so I'm not going to try looking for this again. If you want to override that behavior, maybe you're on an airplane, maybe you're on a bus, you didn't have internet connectivity, you want it to check again, -u is the flag that you want to run that says, I don't care what you cached for the information, go look again for these artifacts. Go out to the remote locations, check again if this exists. So very important from that piece. Some changes around plugins. If you're using plugin references, there's this major change. And there's a lot of sub-meaning to this. Releases are favored over snapshots now. This drove me crazy in Maven 2 because if you pull down snapshots and you didn't have versions specified, you'd find yourself, if you had a snapshot in your local repository, you'd run a command line and it'd be using the snapshot crazy half-baked release of something when really you wanted the official version. So then you had to surgically go into your repository and wipe out the snapshot versions to get it to go back to the normal behavior. The behavior has reversed. Released versions from the command line are favored over snapshots. If you want a snapshot used, you have to specifically call it out. It just makes a whole lot more sense on a day-to-day basis. Plugin versions in your pom.xml cannot be specified by the symbolic words. You can't put that in the pom.xml anymore. You need to give us a concrete version. This behavior is for command line invocation where you haven't given a version. Inside the POM, if you're specifying, you've got to use a concrete version number. And plugins are only resolved from the plugin repository. The interesting thing is you could actually get a plugin from a dependency repository in the path. Those two are nicely and discreetly separated, side by side. Going to have to jump in with the questions. I want somebody to up the ante in terms of good questions for the book. Yes?
You said snapshots will be replaced with the date time.
For deployment, when doing the deploy command, not for pulling in, deploy command only, that behavior changed. Local install will still use the symbolic word snapshot without the date expansion. That stays consistent. That was a good question. So here's a compatibility matrix. This is kept up to date. URL at the bottom. You can get it from the slides. But the nice thing is you can look how good we're already doing this early in the cycle of plugins being compatible with Maven 3. And the coolest thing is these new releases are being cut. So in a typical software release cycle, you'd say, oh, we're gonna cut a new version of it and it'll be only compatible with 3. But the neat thing is we're improving and cleaning up the plugins and they still work with Maven 2. This backwards compatibility has a really nice transition because as we release new drops of these plugins to make them work with Maven 3, they are still fully compatible with Maven 2. These are becoming the official release versions even for the Maven 2 stream that still is getting some dot releases at this point. POM changes. I said none. But let me give you a look a little bit ahead. This is a crystal ball subject to slight change, but it's always nice to know what's the next step. Not just where am I, but what's the next thing coming. The next thing coming in Maven 3.1 or whatever that number is, a major increment to the number, will have pom.xml changes. We're trying to make 3.0 an easy step to get the massive amount of enterprises to move up to 3. We want to make it so frictionless that there's no argument as to why you shouldn't do it. But Maven 3.1 is going to start introducing some new and different behaviors and changes. So 3.0, you're going to be able to hop on. 3.1, you're going to need to think about and maybe author some changes to the pom.xml. There's a few things like reporting that have always been a little bit strange. Why was that a top-level tag? Shouldn't that be a behavior of a particular plugin? That's where it's going. Reporting is now going to be a sub-behavior of the site plugin, not a top-level tag. But that's a move that's happening beyond Maven 3.0. That's in the future past Maven 3. So there's kind of a future look. That's about the only forward-looking statement that I'll offer. Toolchain, something that actually came in a few months ago. This is actually official today, but I think the majority of people are actually going to start using this in the 3.0 space. That'll be the first time that they really recognize and use this. This is a nice efficiency for setting a JDK, a compiler setting across an entire series of your plugins. Not specifying it over and over, but specifying it one time and allowing it to be used repetitively through a bunch of different plugins. The plugins that are already released with this capability today are the ones that you see on the screen, and some more are being added as we speak. But these are released plugins with toolchain support. Now, what does this do? There's a file, toolchains.xml, and we're going to look at the contents of that specifies these toolings. Now, the primary focus today is for JDKs, but it's extensible to support other tools like NetBeans, some of the generators, the other things that we might use in multiple places. But the focus today is on the JDK. What does this file look like? Here's an example on the screen. You can see that we're giving a symbolic name and also some common identifiers to the JDK. What version, what vendor, what brand is this? And then in our specific POMs, remember this is shared. This is in your .m2 directory. This is shared amongst all tooling. In your pom.xml, you symbolically ask for a JDK by some of these facets. I want one that's a 1.5, but I don't care what platform. I want one that's a 1.6, and I do care that it's a Windows particular one. So you can ask by any of the facets, or you can ask by ID. You see I have an Apple 1.5 and Apple 1.6 in this particular case, and a full path. But the path doesn't go into the pom.xml. That's the nice symbolic reference.
Question on this file. So assume that now we have a plugin for Eclipse with Maven 3.0. So will that automatically pull this file? Because in Eclipse you have a preferences tab where I can go and select the JDK that I want to select for this project.
So when using the M2 Eclipse plugin for Eclipse, which is the official one, it will honor this file and it will honor this behavior because it's got the Maven 3.0 engine in that library form that we started with when we started the talk.
Happen automatically or will
Happens automatically. So if your POM, which I'm going to show you the reference in the POM to point it at one of these, then yes, that will work today in the M2 Eclipse plugin.
override the Eclipse preferences, or will it be taken only when the POM is executed?
It will only be taken when the POM is executed. So it will not change. If you're doing the incremental compile, it doesn't yet necessarily change that. But when you run the Maven build from Eclipse, it is honoring that file. So the net result is yes. The net result is yes at the end. So implemented in symbolic form with each of the plugins that you want to reference this. So pretty simple specification. In fact, an example of the file is the best way to show you. So here is the Toolchains plugin. So you do have to get it bootstrapped with the Toolchains plugin. And you bind it to the validation phase, for example. And you notice at the bottom, the important part, and I'll step to the other side so the other folks can see it. The important part at the bottom is that I'm saying I want an Apple 1.5. You notice there's no path, there's no location on disk. It's using indirection through the toolchains.xml to say what I'd like, but not where it lives. So it allows for variation between developers. I'm saying what, not where on that location. Now, when this actually gets used on the later plugins, the neat thing is that you only have to say it once there. And any plugin that's aware of toolchains.xml will use this automatically. And in fact, it'll even show you at the command line. So in action, let me point out a couple of things that are nice and important here when we actually run this. So if I do something like an mvn install, our standard day-to-day command that we'd run, you're going to notice a couple of different things. One, you're going to see that it said Toolchains plugin ran at the beginning, and I'll scroll back and specifically highlight a few things in here. You're also going to see that it called out and told us that we were using a specific specification, Toolchain JDK, where is it coming from, what's the version. As we go down to the further plugins like compiler, and notice I didn't specify anything to those, they all marked that they were using the toolchain. It said, I'm using the toolchain preference, not the system preference, and it gives you which one for each and every case. Toolchain in location, location, location. So you can see all of the plugins that support toolchain today, and you can find when they're going into that toolchain mode. So very nice and verbose as far as telling you that it's doing that. What's the benefit here as a takeaway as we finish that little section? Just minimizes plugin configuration and gives you nice granular control over the JDK and one specification. Less XML, nice consistency over the JDK used on the compiler, the test, the Surefire reports, all these different elements. So book library, and a quick brain joke here for just a second. My wife, yes please? Toolchain.xml?
Toolchain.xml defined an ID. Why
Yes.
do we refer to the ID in the POM.xml?
I don't recommend doing that just because you've lost a little of the value of referencing I want 1.5 for Apple, which is a nice abstraction. But yes, you are allowed to do that. Syntactically, it supports referencing the ID specifically, just not recommended. My wife is not a technologist by practice, but she does know the things I'm into. So she pulled this book off the shelf at the library the other week, and I did kind of find some humor in it. The Anteater of Death. That kind of embodies my thought process. But I said, thanks for getting it, but it's not a technology book. I hate to break it to you. But she was so proud she brought that home for me. So no, The Anteater of Death is not a technology book. So Maven Shell, some fun things, some tooling that fell out of the fact that it was a library.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for that upper tool thing that is supposed to be revealed by the removing the profiles thing.
What? One more time?
The upper tool thing that we were supposed to reveal in 10 minutes by removing the profiles thing.
Yes.
What was that?
I'm about 4 minutes away, so I might have misestimated by a few. Which, I'm a software developer. Have any of us ever accurately estimated delivery of anything? Be honest, really? That's probably the most accurate statement ever given. 4 minutes off by a delivery. If you can do better, I want to hire you for the next project. But yes, it's there. It's pending.
There's roles that you mentioned. You mentioned one of the roles was Toolchain. So I was kind of wondering whether there's another kind of role that can be put in there.
It is limited to that today. It is open to people contributing more kinds of tools, but that was the original one, and then it's open for the community to come up with more ideas.
And the Toolchain will only be 3.1.
The toolchain is available on the latest release of 2, but most people just haven't gotten the news about it, and since 3.0 is so close, I think that's where you'll start hearing the buzz. But if you have the latest release of Maven 2 today, you have that toolchain capability right now, the tip version. Yeah, perfect, good. Maven Shell. This is one of the tools that came out of the fact that Maven 3 is now a library, and this one really excites me. I was the author, or took over the authorship. I don't want to make any false statements. I took over the authorship of a project called the Maven Cli Plugin, and it was really popular with the JBoss team in the United States. It allowed you to step into a shell and run Maven commands with a warmed-up Maven. That is deprecated. That was for Maven 2. For Maven 3, Jason, currently in Thailand, relocating over to California, has taken ownership of a project under the Sonatype banner called Maven Shell. It's currently beta, but it'll be released at the same time as Maven 3. So lots of things coming out in parallel release. What does this do? This is a GitHub project. I like the fact of that. It's not Apache. It's GitHub. So everybody can get access to the source, contribute things to it, which actually they're doing. There's a lot of people who are not employees of Sonatype contributing here. So hop up to the page and do that. But what does it give us? That's where it is. That's what you can get at it. What does it give us? It's a high-performance console. If you're typing a lot of Maven commands, it is massively faster than just invoking mvn install from the normal command line. Because what it's doing underneath the hood is it's keeping a warmed-up copy of Maven ready And it's only taking your next words, like install, and running it against the warmed-up copy. Rather than shutting down the JVM and building it back up and parsing the POM file and all of that, it's doing the minimal amount of steps necessary. In most cases, again, your mileage may vary, but I will guarantee that it is always faster. I can't guarantee you the number, but I can guarantee it's always faster. My practical experience has been between 50% and 75% faster than running it with a cold copy of Maven. And the other interesting thing is it has hints and commands. So rather than just being a dumb terminal, MVN shell, it's got help for the standard things you do in Maven. Color coding, you can see that's nice. A vocabulary of what we can do. So especially if you're new to Maven, I can imagine this would have been a delight to have in the past, because we can see here, oh, what can I do? I can type archetype, I can type install, I've got history for the commands all in here. A lot of benefits that it offers to the person learning Maven, or just reminders for those of you who are coming up to speed on it. So, in addition to that, color highlighting of your builds. This is a wonderful thing if you're trying to parse out, Maven, white and black on a console or whatever you have your colors, pretty hard to see where the errors and warnings are coming in your builds. You got to keep a really sharp eye. I think it's a resume valid skill. I have eyes tuned to the warnings that can come out of a Maven build on a script. You don't need that anymore. You can in fact see green, blue, red, white, codes it accordingly, knowing the Maven vocabulary of the output that it puts at the command prompt. Build success being in green, errors and warnings in red appropriately. You can configure it if you like, but the defaults make a lot of sense for the warnings in red. I like that. It's a nice lightweight addition, but it keeps giving you a little value, a little value, a little value piece by piece. So that's the primary benefit, the speed and the color, but it also has some subcommands that I think are awesome. Archetypes, I like the concept, but the implementation kind of has some rough edges today, where you can instantiate sample Maven projects. A much more polished implementation over here. It uses small little database files, Lucene indexes, that it can pull from the major repositories like Codehouse and Apache, rather than using an XML file that used to declare what are all the archetypes. And it can merge together with what ones you've authored inside your company as well. So the list of archetypes that you can get at is significantly longer than what you could with the old archetype commands. And in fact, here's one: realize, create, crawl, slightly different wording than we're used to in the past with Maven 2, but the idea being, where are some sample projects? Prompt me interactively for the group ID, the package name, the artifact ID for these. Here's the list, same kind of interactive number system if you've ever worked with Archetype before. But again, color-coded, a little bit more readable, and again, not using an XML file for the contents of what archetypes are available. It's actually looking at those Lucene database indexes, so you're going to get a broader range of ones at your disposal. Polyglot, though, the single most exciting bit. Question there.
Does it also do command completion and stuff like root?
It does limited command completion, but the more we work on it, the more that vocabulary is increasing. So yes, it does it, but it's a smaller set of what it completes automatically right now. We'd like it to fully complete things like plugin names and versions and all of that. That's a stretch goal. At the minute, it completes the more common commands that you're used to in the lifecycle phases. Polyglot, the most exciting thing that's come from the separation of the library, though, from the command line. Not just having a command line tool was a major, major shift here. So Polyglot is the ability for Maven to really, in a way, trounce on the things that Gantt and Gradle were using as their language advantage. If you've ever looked at those build tools, they were saying, oh, we have Groovy, and I love Groovy, Scott loves Groovy. Why doesn't Maven have Groovy? This is a big gap. Why don't we let you, in fact, more than Groovy, why don't we let you choose from a plethora of languages? I don't want to be a bigot and say, oh, Groovy's the only really good new language on here. It'd be better if I built in an extensibility layer and let you choose the library that you wanted to author those POMs in. And that's exactly what this project is. Once again, it's up at GitHub. It's a beta. It'll be released in accordance with Maven 3.0. And the interesting thing that I have to tell you is it's a replacement distribution. You do not have to have the traditional Maven 3 on your box and Polyglot. It's a full superset of the core Maven 3. You can just download Polyglot, and you'll get the XML features, the normal language, but all these additional languages too. And you say, but I don't trust that that's quite the same behavior as the traditional command line. But the reason that I can tell you is, back to where we started. It's a library. We pulled in exactly the same jar for Maven at its heart, so there's no difference to the behavior. If you have a pom.xml, you can use Polyglot Maven and you'll never notice the difference. But you can use these additional languages. So it's a full distribution. I want you to be very clear about that. You can just go grab Polyglot. Pum Converter comes with this as well, though, and it's literally the word translate. Translate.shell, translate.bat. Unix and Windows implementation of that. This allows you to go from any language to any language that the translator understands. And as of today, there's 6 in there, and I imagine there will probably be 8 by the time we ship this final product. This is the single most exciting thing, and when I'm showing Maven to folks, this is what really gets them excited, because I'll show you some samples of the language, and I think you'll just really go, oh, this is a breath of fresh air. So you can also write DSLs. This is more than just writing it in Groovy. This is giving you additional vocabulary to express things in more concise form. Rather than having to write it out with a colon or whatever the language du jour is of the file, you can write some nice shortcuts, and I'll show you what those look like. And here's an idea that's relatively unexplored. You can modify the behavior of the build with lifecycle hooks. It's there. It hasn't been exploited. I'm kind of excited to see what happens in this space. But with these language-specific hooks, you could add in a language-specific behavior, a pop-up, an interaction, a question, a modification to the build process, an optimization that looks at the file stamps and says, we don't care about these, we do care about the others, a generation process. All of these are possible, but that's yet to be explored. The hooks are there, but I haven't actually seen anybody do anything exciting yet. But the possibilities are pretty cool. Here's a traditional pom.xml, though. Boring, traditional, we've seen this, premise being that you know Maven 2. What can we do with this? Well, taking that exact POM, let's go to YAML. Yet another markup language, relatively familiar to some folks who've worked in the multi-language space. And if we run this translation, we're going to run it through here. We're going to change it from XML to YAML form. Simple and blazingly fast. Just to prove it, I'm going to cat the pom.xml again, show you the contents, prove that it's exactly the one that I gave you syntax highlighted on the slides. Now we're going to run it through the translation process and look at the result of that. So clear off the screen, run the translate. Let's look at what a YAML POM. This is my new preferred format. As much as I love the Groovy, YAML is my new flavor that I really like for the POM. So translate, bam, couple of seconds, warms up Maven, runs the translate, puts it into an object model, runs it through the output of the new format. That is a valid POM. You don't have to round trip back to XML. Let me say a couple of things to add some context here. This isn't a trip to YAML and then we got to bring it back to XML. This is one way, if you like, get rid of the XML. You're done. You can use the YAML, the Groovy, the Ruby, the Scala, the Clojure, the Xtext. Wow. That's a lot of languages out of the box. And whatever one suits you best, we're making no judgment. Whatever one suits you best. But, oh, I love that. Look at the conciseness of this. Dependencies, a dash, a name of the artifact ID, and the nice comma separation. So much more compact than the XML with the name and closing and opening tags and all the pointy angle bracket things that can hurt us. That was good. Got a little chuckle out of that one. All right, so pom.yaml. Here it is in a much more readable form rather than at the console with syntax highlighting. I like that. Once you have this, let me warn you, maybe don't download Maven 3. Maybe don't get Polyglot for a while because you're going to be very grumpy for the weeks until it becomes an official release. Once you have this, you are very, very upset using any previous version of Maven. So maybe wait just for your own benefit, but I can't give this up. Pom.Clojure. If you're into that particular JVM language, there's another expression of it. It translates from any to any. Pom.Scala, it also supports that. I have to poke a little bit of fun here, and one day somebody's going to slap me for this. It's the only one that gets longer than the XML. Make your own decision based on that. Pom.Groovy, the default conversion, looks pretty good, but it gets even better. This is the default conversion to Groovy, I'll show you a couple other value adds that Groovy has specific to this DSL. So let's do a build, just to make it nice and tangible and show you there's no smoke and mirrors. He ran translate, but how do we actually make this work? Very, very simply, just as you'd expect. In fact, only one option flag that you need to know at this point. So we run the translate tool. I'm going to go to a different language just to show that it works in any of the different flavors. I'm going to go to a different language here. POM.YAML, different POM, sorry, wrong wording, but different POM, slightly more expressive in here. I'm taking away the XML just to prove the fact that we don't have to have both. Because that was kind of my first step. Oh, I've got to have POM, XML, and YAML. No. I just ran the build straight from YAML. Once you have Polyglot Maven, it natively understands those POM formats.
What I'm trying to understand is, are you building the YAML code base with the YAML POM or the Java code base with the YAML POM?
So here I finally got to it about 6 minutes late. Here's what I was talking about of the value. Having the removal of, let me give you two pieces of information to the question. The first one being the removal of that profiles.xml allows us to have the whole contents of the POM expressed in one file. Thus, we can translate it to a different language. The separation for your exact question that you just asked now is we are simply authoring the POM in a different format, but the build process runs exactly the same as it did with XML. No change at all. So the build process, the steps of compilation and the resources and the jar and the war remain 100% the same. All we've got is a more concise language to write the POM in now. That's the goal.
Any difference in terms of performance?
In terms of performance, no, they're so marginally close that it's statistically insignificant. The XML parsing versus this is literally microseconds difference.
Is Maven Shell also going to work with Polyglot?
It is. It does not at the minute, but it is on the roadmap to make it so. But it does not at the moment.
At the moment, it feels like a great innovation thing, but it doesn't fire me essentially. It seems like a very great innovation thing to have it in a different form, but it doesn't essentially fire me because the building process is taking approximately the same time.
That's true. This is only to make them more readable and more editable. That's the goal. Is it more human readable to look at the POM? And that offers value because we make less mistakes when it's easy to read through code. Just like Groovy does for our Java, it's easier to read the POMs and understand what they're doing. But absolutely, it does not affect the build process. That's a valid statement.
So talking about editability of this YAML, so do you have any guidelines of how to edit this YAML?
The documentation will come, and there's Wiki Pages to do it, but my best recommendation at this point is to translate a file that you already know and then use that as your learning experience for the minute. I would use that as the basis for now.
During the start, you had mentioned that Maven 3 brings in extra validations for the XML.
Yes.
But if you are now converting it into YAML or Groovy or something else, does the same validation hold true?
It does. And the validations are happening on the object model, not on the file contents. So the value proposition there is no matter how many languages we come up with, the validations maintain across any language format here. So good question up there as well. Do you have to have Groovy on your box to do it? Absolutely not, but it ships the library. When I told you that Polyglot Maven was a superset distribution of Maven, we're talking the difference between 2 meg to 50 meg because it includes the language jars for all of these languages that we support. It's not yet modular in the sense that you can choose the Groovy or the closure box when you're downloading it. You just get all of the languages that we support, so hence the difference of the two distributions. But the Groovy jar is in the library directories for the Polyglot Maven, but you don't have to separately pull it. It's just part of the package.
Why change from Plexus to the juice as a IUC container?
That I would consider a nitty-gritty implementation, but it doesn't in any way come through that you would see it from an end user of Maven. So restating the question for everybody's benefit, they're changing the dependency injection framework underneath that Maven's authored with, but as an end user, there is not supposed to be, and currently not, any visibility to you as a Maven user of that change from Plexus to Juice as the IOC.
So will that affect me when I'm writing plugins?
It will in very slight ways, but very, very slight. Most 80%, 90% big hand waving will remain identical with no change whatsoever. 10% will have to change. Hence that compatibility grid that we were making, showing the yellow triangle and the green circle. Those are the few that have a few lines that need to be modified. And where were they being modified? Mostly when they were reaching across a boundary illegally that they shouldn't have been doing. It's now nicely partitioned, saying, no, you can't just directly talk to me. You've got to send a message down here, and the message then can come back to you. That's the nature of that one. So Groovy with macros. Let's keep two more interesting things before we close down on time and keep it nice and prompt. Groovy with macros. Look at how much shorter that got. When I'm saying macros, let me show you a couple of the bits. First off, we can do things like the dependency curly brace. That is a shortening over the natural form. I can express it in this dependency macro right here. And the neat thing is this expands anywhere. So any place where you have the coordinate, anywhere in the POM that you have the coordinate of an artifact ID, a group ID, and a version, you can use this shorthand notation and it will expand out accordingly. So that's nice free form to be able to express it in that way. There are not macros yet implemented in the other languages, but there are in this particular Groovy one. It's just the first one that we've had time to do that with. M2 Eclipse, though, I've been referring to this just a little bit, and it's kind of my closing tool that I can excitedly talk about. A lot of things have happened in this, and in fact, just about 6 weeks ago, maybe 7, a 0.10 release came out. And this is a little bit strange on the numbering. I know, I'm not in charge of that by any means, but this is the latest, greatest release, and it's getting really close to final. All these things are going to drop at the same time as a final release. They're all aligning. Major, major improvements. If you've ever used M2 Eclipse before and been a little bit dissatisfied, please come back and try this version again. Radically better experience. It's really supported primarily on 3.5.1, so I hope that's the version of Eclipse that you're on. If not, it's time to kind of move towards that. We're going to support one old version and the current version of Eclipse. 3.6 is coming out in just about 2 months from now, so we already have some preliminary support for that, but we're going to support current and one back in terms of this version. And as far as actually using it, the benefits are pretty incredible. Let me show you on conflicts. I promised some visualizations of what this would do. Dependency conflicts across the multiple projects, not across a single POM, but across multiple projects. You can go over here to a pom.xml, double-click, open it up, visualize the POM in terms of a tree view or a graph view, but also visualize what the conflicts of the versions are and resolve those visually as well. Now, granted, that's actually a real project I'm working on. I know, embarrassing as it looks, but yes, this is a real project. Kind of craziness, but you notice the highlights conflicted. I don't like the graph so much. I actually prefer the hierarchy, which is a tree view instead, but they're showing you exactly the same thing. Graph view, hierarchy view, same information, 2 visualizations. This is a lot easier to see. Here's some that are conflicted. For example, Spring, it tells you the version that was chosen. It tells you the version that was conflicted. What did it ask for, but what did Maven give it? So you've got a full visualization of that, and how would you solve it? You go over to Dependency Management. You'd make the stronger statement of what version you actually want. You'd give it a version of Spring, get the grid. This is using the Lucene indexes. You can see every version that's available out on Maven Central, even though you haven't downloaded them. You can choose a specific version, even though you've never had it on your box before. You can click OK. It inserts that stronger statement. The entire grid is now resolved with the version that you specifically stated. The conflict is removed. You've made an implicit decision what version. You notice now it said 205 was the decision. The word conflicted is gone, and it says from 203. So it still tells you what the old choice was, but it removed the word conflicted because you made an implicit decision. The tooling on that has just dramatically improved. I'm so excited about that. So 2 elements in closing, 2 closing slides in the 30 seconds that I have. I've got the book to give away, which I'm going to do in 15 seconds, but all of these are actually free as a PDF. Only the print copy actually costs. The PDFs were O'Reilly books. They bought the rights to those back, and they give them away for free. That's pretty generous for a high-quality O'Reilly book. You should grab PDF copies of that. I've got the link at the bottom. And sample projects, these always help me. I have about 35 of them now. 15. If you want to know how to do something in Maven, I've got folders named. Do an echo, do a dependency, do a war, do some more complex things. Go grab these free projects one step at a time and show you how to do things. And that's just kind of my contribution back. So what do we see? Last slide, what did we learn today? Hopefully we saw the validations. You're ready for that. Go ahead and validate your POMs today. The performance is much better. Compatibility, almost perfect with a backwards drop-in replacement. Toolchain, kind of cool if you want to specify the JDK. Shell, great for when you're invoking Maven over and over. You're going to get at least a 50% benefit in my experience from that. Polyglot, if you don't like XML, we finally got an answer for you. And M2 Eclipse is kind of the icing on the cake in terms of visualizations of dependency management. So if they have evals here at the conference, thank you if you fill those out. Otherwise, let's give the book away. And Scott, I'm gonna go with this. Are you ready? I'm gonna go with this. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much for the questions. All right, thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthew, for that wonderful talk. I'm sure.